let's get right to it. All right, plan for today. We're gonna do another workshop. We did one last time. Most of you weren't able to stick around for it for reasons that we covered last time. It's gonna be similar to that. Hopefully you watched the video. I have suspicions, but if you feel like you missed anything by either not being present for that or maybe by not watching the video, which is kind of your own fucking fault, we're gonna do something pretty similar today, so we're all gonna be on the same page regardless. And if you were here for that session, this is the sort of thing that's good to do more than once, so you're not gonna lose out either. I sent you an email. I sent you two, technically speaking. Did I give you guys this disclaimer already? I haven't, have I? I have different classes. Sometimes they wash together. Have I talked about how workshop works in this class yet?
We opened it up, but we didn't go into it.
Okay, cool. Let's talk. All right, real quick. The disclaimer. While you open one of the two emails I sent you, which by the way, they're the same thing. People have different technology. One of those emails is going to work for you. One of them might not. So try them out. If one doesn't work, do the other one. It's in your inbox. Go for it. All right. While you're doing that, this is what we're looking at. It's going to be up here, but I have found for all kinds of reasons, it's more helpful for most of you to have it, like on your phone or whatever. So that's why I do that. This is one of your classmates' paragraphs that they turned in for homework. As such, number one, I want us to be respectful of each other. I very rarely have any kind of an issue with that. You guys are normally pretty good to each other, especially once I tell you this is one of you. And I think in the back of everyone's mind, once I say that, everyone goes, oh shit, this could be me one day, right? So just be cool to each other, be respectful. We will criticize some of the things in the workshop. That's kind of how it works, but it'll be constructive. I'll also say, I understand not everyone is super pumped by having the whole class look at what you did. Good thing about that, I keep it totally anonymous. So if this is something that really bums you out, I do get it. But if you don't want anybody to know it's you, don't say anything, and we will have no idea. To be totally honest, I have forgotten whose this is. I look at so many things like this, I could not, gun to my head, tell you who wrote this right now. So it's anonymous to me too, okay? Now all that said as well, I will not bring you pure shit. I will never bring something to your attention for us just to rag on, okay? That's not what we're doing in here. The purpose of this exercise, I pull examples that I feel like do some things well, at least reasonably, but then also the things that they could improve upon are things that a lot of us could improve upon. So it's for everyone, the points we make about this draft, okay? All right, with that in mind, let me mark Miles present. I want to review something real quick and then we're gonna read this. Do worry we've done this, but we need to review it again anyway. 3 eyes. Anybody recall this guy, how it works? Go for it.
Identity, illustration, and interpretation.
That's pretty close. Identify. Illustrate. Interpret. Oh, and I just remembered, I want these guys to get the full experience. Can't miss out on this. All right. Now, I'm fond of telling you, if remembering these 3 words helps you remember this, awesome. That's how my brain works. If you can't hang on to this nonsense, that's okay too, because what matters is the next part. Does anyone remember? Yeah.
Topic, sentence, evidence, and analysis.
Okay. Hopefully, this part should sound pretty familiar, like from previous classes. What's a topic sentence meant to do?
Set up your paragraph.
Sets up your paragraph. How does it go about doing that?
Tells the reader what you're going to be talking about.
Like your main idea, right? Good. What else should a topic sentence accomplish? What kind of statement should it be?
Argumentative.
Should be a claim, should be an argument. Yes. and it should be the main idea. So again, the other way you can talk about this, it's almost like a thesis for your body paragraph, right? Evidence. I would hope that's self-explanatory, but what's that going to be for this paper?
Quote.
Pretty much always going to be a quotation, right? We're using a written text. Please don't sum up huge chunks of a poem for me. That's a bad idea. Yeah, quotations in this case. It's going to be our evidence. And then, of course, your analysis is where you use this evidence to prove this argument. So every body paragraph works every single time. Awesome. All right. So here's what we're going to do. Take a minute, and you can read it up here. I'll try to kill the lights a little bit because that glare is ridiculous. But again, it's on your whatever you got. Take a minute, read over this to the best of your ability. These 3 things in mind. I want you to do 2 things with these 3 things. Is that confusing enough? Number 1, do you see these 3 parts? Topic, sentence, evidence, analysis. Just do you see them? I'm not saying they're awesome, okay? Do they take swings at this, okay? Number 2, how good a job do they do? Where could we improve upon these things? Do you think? Do we have any missed opportunities? This sort of stuff, right? Take a minute, read over it. We're going to talk about it. Second question. Your eyes are better than mine. This is an honest question. Can you guys see that okay?
Yeah.
It's a little dark. I know. But especially at this point, this whole setup's a joke. If I turn that on, it might get brighter, but then the glare, what do you prefer? I know you don't care, but like, if I could make this at all better for you, which one would
How
work?
it is right now is great. It's great.
All right. I deserve that. Okay. 3 parts of a body paragraph. Do we have it? Just do we have it? Yeah, I think so. They're not, out of the park necessarily, but this is a rough draft, right? Bare minimum. If you got the parts, you might be okay at this stage, right? Okay. So that said, topic sentence. Where's it at? The top? Yeah. First sentence, for sure. I'm just going to break them apart a little bit so we can see them a little better. Okay. Evidence. Where's it at? This is the easy part of the process. Yeah. That, I'm going to go ahead and say longish quotation, but we'll talk about that. And that means the rest, probably, hopefully, is our analysis. Some kind of an argument, walking us through some kind of thought process. Okay. Before we can much jump into what kind of a job we did, how we might improve, whatever, I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping, okay? Number 1, we'll talk about the topic sentence. As a sentence, it's all right. It's all right. So we're going to bypass that. The evidence, though. Somebody talk to me about the evidence. Do you see any admittedly nitpicky issues? Anything right now we need to fix? Good. We don't need to know stanzas. We need Fairchild, and then we need the line numbers actually, which this is at the beginning of the poem, so I can find it real quick. The book is about to fall apart. Oh, I thought it was at 45. It's not the beginning. Their gestures, that's line 3, all the way to reach and balance. Oh my goodness. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Good God. All right. 3, 2, 8. That's how you do that. Also, though, you should not use that many lines at once. Is your hand up, sir? Okay. I'll allow it. What else do we need here? We need one more thing, probably, for this quotation. Well, 2 more things. Yeah. We need, and I shouldn't have closed my book, we need slashes to mark the line breaks. Yes. So let me do that. Their gestures, love, and we break on curves, and away, and fingertips. Oh, and then reach. Sweet. All right. Just curious. Does anybody know why, other than we're supposed to? Does anybody know why we mark where the line breaks occur?
Because the poet did it on purpose.
Yeah. And we talk about that sometimes, right? Not all the time, but sometimes we use those line breaks in our analysis. So you gotta mark those. Okay. One more thing we need for this quotation. We need better context. We need better context. I know B.H. Fairchild said it. His name is on the book. So, admittedly, this is right at the top of the poem. There's not a lot happening, but you could give us something, right? To be fair to the writer here, the student, they kind of give it to us in the topic sentence. But I would also say that maybe that's an issue if the topic sentence is our context. We're gonna skip it for now, but I want it in the back of your brain. We're probably gonna have to fix this. Okay. Analysis. And of course this is, if we're doing our jobs, and I think we have, this is kind of attached to the topic sentence. If you have to reread it real quick, go ahead. It's only a couple sentences. If you could sum up what it is we're saying about these lines. There's a lot of, what's our argument here? What are we trying to prove?
That we're never gonna keep playing basketball no matter how old we are.
Yeah, basically. Is that an argument? I'll help you a little bit. It is. But what's with the trepidation? Why are you guys not really sold, maybe, on it being an argument? You know why?
Kind of obvious.
It's not worth proving. I know it's really harsh. It's banal. B-A-N-A-L. It is an argument, but it's obvious. I don't know why I said that way. It's not worth proving. Yes?
Is that also because, like, are you supposed to go based off of what the poem's about in these things? Or, like, since that is something that's evident in the poem, are we not supposed to base any of this off of evidence?
I think you're asking 2 things at once. Okay, so
Yeah.
first of all, what you almost never want to do, just good practice. Don't tell me what the poem is literally about at length, right? Because it's going to be either banal or even worse, summary, right? Always assume, and I think you guys were taught differently in some cases, so we want to nail this down right now. Always assume in a class like this, your audience has read the text, right? So that's part 1. You had like a different part to that question though. Could you try that again? I'm sorry, but
No, you're good. So, like, you're saying not want to use, obviously, what the audience would assume.
Well, don't make that what you're proving, right? If we need context, we need some of that information. But if your whole point is, as you sort of succinctly put, these old men are going to keep doing it, it's like, we know.
So more so take it from what the poem is initially about, like this one isn't technically about baseball. Basketball.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah. That would be one direction ahead. I mean, think of it this way. We said before, it's not, if it is an argument, and it is, but it's not worth proving. Like, I told some of this the other day, but I'll give it to everybody. My example is always this. If we were out on the sidewalk after class, and I stopped you and I was like, ho, 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 you gotta look both ways before you cross. Check it out. I got a pamphlet. I'm gonna talk to you for about 10 minutes. You would go, no, I got it. I don't need you to break it down. I understand. They come from both directions. I don't want to die, so I'm gonna make sure I don't need, it's banal. It's not worth all the effort. That's what we're saying. So, admittedly, as far as paragraphs go, it's a little short, you know, and again, it's rough and all that stuff. The real reason it's so short is because there's nothing to say. The student, the path they kind of set themselves on, there's just not much to do with it. And your brain goes, yeah, we got it, done, right? That makes your job harder. So here's what we're gonna do. In admitting that really kind of the whole tenor of the paragraph is a little bit banal, we're going to have to mess with the topic sentence at some point. But we can't really do that yet. We got to figure this guy out first. Does anyone recall how we've talked about quotations every single day in class, honestly? How do you perform analysis with quoted material? What do you need to do?
Break it down and like, well,
I let you trailed off. Keep in mind, it's very hard to hear anything. But what do you mean by break it down? What do you?
like go through what you're quoting and analyze kind of what each of the words mean.
Well, not necessarily each of them,
but
but
the words that stand out.
pick out significant details, right? And look, here again, I know why they quoted fucking a quarter of the poem, right? That's honestly almost not hyperbole. Because again, when you go to draft, you really don't know what you want to talk about. In this case, they weren't even really sure what they wanted to quote. They're like, I'll take all of it. But even when you do that, you got to try to find details. You got to dig into very, very tight spaces, okay? And once you do that, then you can come back, you can probably cut a big sort of chunk of this quotation because you're like, oh, I'm focused on this element, right? And you're rolling. All that said, I'll read it for us. Their gestures, this is about the basketball game, right? In love again with the pure geometry of curves, hey Stone, rise toward the ball, falter and fall away. On the boards, their hands and fingertips tremble in tense little prayers of reach and balance. We talked about these lines a little bit. I know it was like a week or something ago. So let's do this first. We've already had the, I'm going to assume, slightly uncomfortable conversation about what this poem is really about, right? It is about basketball. It is. But it's also about what? Fucking. Yeah. Like, I say that intentionally. It's not about sex. At some point, he's like, do they still make love? Line break to their wives. This poem is about fucking. That's what this poem is about. There's a difference. Anyway, we could go down that road. We've already done that, though. I'm not interested in that, right? For this class. All that is to say, if we wanted to, what elements of this quotation might we focus on if we were going to write this paragraph kind of in line with that argument? What are some details we could pick out, do you think? Their gestures in love. Again, he breaks here, so you could argue we're talking about love gestures, you know? If a handshake is like a friendly gesture, then what's a love gesture? That's a very different thing, potentially, right? Sure. Is there anything else?
Geometry of curves.
The pure geometry of curves. Again, on the one hand, the way the ball moves around the court, the way the players kind of flow, like in this really interesting, like it's a really beautiful way to talk about basketball, right? Sure. But then, you know, especially if we think about later in the poem, how this guy sort of, I wouldn't even say characterizes women, probably caricaturizes. Do you know the difference between character and caricature?
Character form of exaggeration.
Yeah, like more two-dimensional. Women kind of exist in this poem for service only, if you pardon how awful that is. I didn't write it. But, so he's, you know, he's talking, yeah, you get it. We could do that, we could. But I'm gonna challenge you to do something different, okay? So let's say we're not gonna talk about that. And if it helps you a little bit, let's eliminate some of this. We're not gonna talk about those first two lines, because I think it's gonna be hard for us today to do that and not talk about sex. So let's do this. Well, I feel bad. Hang on. Oh no! Hang on, I got it. Sweet. I got ahead of myself. What else could we talk about in this quotation? If you remember, I said you quote for ideas, you don't quote for, I'm fucking up all over. You don't quote for ideas, you quote for language, okay? So we're talking about words or phrases. Most of the words and phrases in this quotation are pretty standard, right? Like pretty typical. It would not stop you on a street corner if you overheard somebody talking about reaching and balancing and things like that, right? Like that's not a big deal. Is there anything else in this quotation that you don't have to have a reason why, but might be more loaded, might have something else going on, strikes you? Because there's one word in particular, and I hate that I'm going to make this into a scavenger hunt, that we actually haven't really talked about at all.
Or little prayer week.
That phrase is interesting, but here again, and we kind of talked about this before, on the boards, their hands and fingertips tremble in tense little prayers of reach and balance. That's, again, pretty strictly in the argument we had that other day, because on the boards, does anybody remember what that is? I'm talking about a headboard. A backboard, but also a headboard type of, you get it. So, I don't know. So I would say let's avoid that, again, just so we don't go down the same road we've been down. I will delete that stuff. I feel better about that. Okay. What else could we dig into? Rise toward, we'll go line by line, backwards. Rise toward the ball, falter, and fall away. Anything in that you feel like we could really use?
Falter.
Are you saying that just because you guys would never say falter?
No, I looked it up.
Huh?
I looked it up. It's like to start to lose strength and momentum.
Yeah, it's to trip. Yeah. But again, I would contend, when I said it's not a word you guys would use, I mean like you would never go, bro, just faltered now, right? Like it's not, but it's not that interesting probably. Unless you got something, I'm willing to hear it. I feel like that's a no. Bear in mind, I cannot read your facial expressions. You are all blurry to me. That's real. I got bad eyesight. Okay. Next line. Pure geometry of curves. I know this is arduous. We're almost done with this part. Pure geometry of curves. Any words we haven't really focused on yet that are odd in conversation? Is that a hand? I just told you I can't see it. Okay. Yeah. Think about it for a second. We've glossed over that every time. Like it's part of that phrase, pure geometry of curves, but we're not really focused on geometry, nor is the speaker. He's interested in the curves, right? We kind of talk about that. Geometry is, you know, unless you're a math major, a weird thing to bring up. Like it's odd. And in this context, it's doubly odd. Basketball. Nobody's really talking about geometry. No one's naming it, right? So let's think about it for a second. I'm going to force us to focus on it. To that end, what we can do, here again, we can probably cut this. Already, we're doing that. Now I'm going to ask, context. What's happening in this quotation? Like, if you showed these two lines to a buddy and you wanted them to understand it, you would probably have to say more than B.H. Fairchild states, right? Well, what information would they need? I mean, that would help considering it's very descriptive. But you could just give them that information in your own words. Like, how would you say that? What's happening here?
He's comparing the geometry to the curves, but not really trying to compare it because he doesn't say it in his writing. It's like a far-fetched thing that you have to go through to understand that he's going, like he's describing.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Kind of. Something like that. I don't like make because again that's really suggesting some things now. But it's better. It's better than B.H. Fairchild 6. All we're trying to say is the speaker is describing the game and that's what's happening. That's some iteration of that is what we need. Alright. Talk to me about geometry for a second. Like we're not gonna talk about geometry. I don't mean that's not this class, right? But what's your well, I'm so out of my depth as soon as we get to math, right? Denotatively, dictionary definition, if you had to try, what's geometry? How would you define it?
Study of shapes.
That's pretty good. The mathematical study of shapes, you know, something like that. That's pretty good. You were ready with that. Connotatively, do you guys know the difference between denotation and connotation? Okay. Connotation is not the dictionary definition, it's the association with a term. I did it at the top of class when I said, what was old men playing basketball about? And somebody said sex. And I said, no, it's about fucking. Denotatively, those words mean the same thing. They do. Same act. Connotatively, different. Do you see what I'm saying? They suggest different things. There's a different tone. There's different energy to those words. So, and this is strange, connotatively, geometry. What does it like make you think of? What, if anything, do you associate with that word? Huh? Math joke. It's okay. Keep it to yourself. Yes, ma'am.
Maybe like body shapes.
Well, no, I'm saying I appreciate what you're doing. Don't even apply it to the poem yet. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Like the word on its own. I'm curious. Seems like we're into shapes. Okay. You got shapes. What do you say?
Math in general.
Math. Yeah, just like it. It's on the same tree branch as like trigonometry. You know. I don't know much more beyond that. But you kind of you conceive of them in the same way. Do you know what I'm saying? So if we're going to say geometry is basically a synonym for just capital M math, right? What are some connotations we have about math? Again, how do you conceive of it? Like, what is it in the universe type of thing? Math.
Be like basketball, it'd be like calculating your shot.
Okay, don't even worry about applying. We're not doing that yet. Just what is math? What is making calculations? What the fuck is that?
I don't know.
I feel you. Yeah. It's all the sort of formulas and
Problems.
operations. Yeah. So this list of things, we got formulas and operations and orders of operations actually. What is all that? Like, what is that? And I know this is stupid. What does this mean to you guys? I'm not talking about your daily life. We're not doing that. There's a point. Trust me. But what, like, why is it weird? Why is it odd to talk about math just on its face? I know we can understand it, but on the surface for a second, why is it a little bit weird to talk about math, talk about geometry when it comes to basketball? Because that is strange. Why is that?
Because basketball isn't really like a basic equation kind of thing. Like,
How not? I'm not disagreeing. I'm curious.
because you don't have to. I mean, I guess it is in a sense an equation, but at the same time, you
Yeah.
don't have numbers or anything that relate to it.
Oh man, you know, Twitter. There's a bunch of numbers, man. That's all Twitter is. I take your point, but like, what are we saying? What is she saying? Because I think generally we agree with this. It's not numbers. It's not. That's one of the problems with sports games being so big now. Is like this dude's a 97 or whatever. It's like he's an 89. It's what the fuck are you talking about right now? He's a human being. Like maybe his stomach hurt the other day. Like what the fuck are you talking about? There's no. So why is it strange? If I'm hoping you kind of take my meaning here, to apply a thing like a term like geometry or math to a game like basketball with people running around.
Comparing something that's like an equation to a physical, like doing something kind of.
So let's take that term
Like
then.
an
Equation. What is an equation? Like what is it? Why doesn't it fit in basketball, an equation?
Because people don't just stand there and be like, oh, I need to throw this shot at like da degrees to make
Yeah.
it. Like,
What do they do?
People just shoot.
they just shoot it.
They react and they move. And again, sometimes they may have done it a million times and they're awesome at it. Steph Curry misses sometimes. I'm saying like it's not perfect in the way that math is. If you know how to do it, which you and I apparently don't, you'll get the same answer every time, right? Like it's a solid thing. It's a definite thing. People aren't. And everything we do isn't, right? Like it's kind of strange to apply that term to this game. You see what I'm saying? So let's start there. And I'm going to try to force you guys to think about it. And I don't apologize, actually. But we'll do it this way. Oh, and they did something similar, which I do appreciate. If you're going to talk about a word, you got to quote, okay? They were talking about again, and the way the original sentence read, it's down here. It took me a hot minute to understand what the fuck they meant. Because it just sounds like the author uses the word again. I was like, what word? You use quotation marks. Anyway, by applying the term geometry, the speaker, and now we can just go off. So the road I've honestly pushed you guys down hard. Geometry, equations, I guess we brought up some of that stuff. Evokes this is what you guys said, but I want to try to say it again. Why doesn't this fit in basketball? If we could try to finish the sentence.
People in stands and thinking about like the radius of the basketball associated.
Yeah. So no one is actively participating in this like a mathematical equation.
It's
More physical than critical thinking.
It's more body.
Yeah.
It's well, we start there. Okay, cool. Because sports almost depend upon rather than all I can think of is nerd shit. I'm not gonna lie, you can't write that. Rather than intellectual
Prowess,
that's not bad.
intellectual ability.
That's all right. So this is the start. What we've laid out for the reader is we've proven is that this is weird, and here's why. So we've kind of suggested you need to pay attention to. The downside to that is now there's a lot of pressure on us to bring it home. We got to do something with it. Why do you think the speaker does that then? Right? I agree. It's weird to bring this term and kind of all the associations we have with it into this particular arena. Equations. I think we need to define that better, honestly. It's not just intellectual, it is that. But the way you guys are kind of joking about it, like no one is calculating the radius of the basketball. No one is on the court thinking, oh, I need to, this angle 37 degrees, right? They're not doing any of that. But still, we haven't quite defined what that is. We understand why they're not doing it. Okay, we got that. But what is the thing they're not doing? I think that'll help us a bit. Do we have any math majors in here? Good for you. No, what are equations? I think we kind of said this already, but we need to do it here in the paper. They're what? In a way that basketball isn't.
Sequence of numbers.
Yeah.
Something you can like solve.
Something you can solve, which says what? If a thing can be solved, like there's one answer. Huh?
Like basketball, I mean, you can do it, like you can do everything right. Like you can shoot a shot and it feels good, but it may not go in. Like it's not always guaranteed. With geometry problem, if you do everything right, you should get
It's
the
right.
same answer every time.
So it's more, and there may be a better term, but this basketball is more organic, right? Which again, the flip side of that is equations aren't.
More concrete.
Yeah.
Basketball's more concrete.
Yeah, more definite.
You can start the game off the same way that you do every single time, but that doesn't always mean you're gonna win in the end, kind of thing.
Okay, and again, totally unlike an equation. Okay, so further, equations have answers. They can be solved. That's my fancy way of saying there's one answer. That's all that is. Okay. I should say at this stage, I write like me, you write like you. Don't. Some of you get really fancy with a thesaurus. Don't do that. It almost never works. I'm just telling you. Don't do it. Anyway. So equations have answers. They can be solved. Often they have one right answer. In other words, okay. Now we can talk a little bit about basketball. This might be easier. How is basketball not like solving an equation? How's it different?
There's not one definite answer.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear any of that.
There's not like one definite answer to like a game. Like,
It's much more, again, we said organic.
Sporadic.
Yeah, sporadic's not a bad word. Yeah, chaotic feels too strong, right? I mean, sometimes it can seem like chaos, but there's plays and stuff like that. It's more unpredictable. Is that kind of what we're getting at? I think. At least when you compare it to a math equation, it's more unpredictable. Is that?
Not uniform.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Well, compared to like a math equation, I think like it's more unforeseen variables added into basketball.
Oh Jesus! Are you sure you're not a mathematician?
No. No.
Okay.
Then it is like in equations, like in basketball, so many things that's unforeseen. Like if you
Yeah.
on the floor or someone could throw something. Versus a math equation is like the variables all are there. You don't have to worry about.
They're there at the
some
front.
random
Yeah.
variable popping up.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
The Good. I was hoping Google would figure that out. From the almost random appearance of variables, which simply can't be accounted for ahead of time. Okay. So we've for sure explained, like hard, the difference between math and basketball, at least connotatively, right? Because as soon as you said variables, I was like, well, fuck, that's math. Like now it's kind of, but this works. So now we got a little bit of ammunition, but I'm not going to say it is necessarily going to be easy. We got to kind of figure out what the speaker might be suggesting by using geometry, even though it's unexpected, even though for all the reasons we gave, it doesn't really make a ton of sense, right? Why do you think he does that? Talking about these old men playing. Again, if it helps you a little bit, the themes we're kind of kicking around here: certainty, predictable things, I guess. Something that has one answer, you know, anything like that. Why are we describing the old men playing basketball like that? Do you think? There's all kinds of possible answers, but I got one. I can't give it to you. I'll put it to you this way. In all the ways that basketball is unpredictable, for sure. Is there anything in this poem that is predictable?
Like getting old because they didn't hurt.
Well, I mean, old people getting hurt is basically where you ended at. Sure.
No, I'm talking about because like where he's talking about like the grind and bone and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
Everybody's gonna go through that because like we're all gonna age and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. No. See, I was saying your very first thing you said. Everybody's gonna get old. That's how it works. I don't know if you know this. Yeah, the inevitability of age is kind of the unfortunate equation of life, right? This is kind of, yeah. Well, let's think about that for a second. Why might that be important in this poem in particular? That there's no getting away from it. It's the math that you live every day. Is you're going to get older, and if you're lucky, I guess, one day you'll be like one of these guys, you know? Why could we try to argue? Might the speaker, I feel like your hand's almost up.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Maybe because like it just it basically displays how he's basically afraid of getting old. Like he wish it was a math equation he could do to make sure his life is like to the T how he wants it.
I mean, we could maybe get there eventually, but that's a bit of a leap at this stage. I mean, all of this comes back to the speaker. Even when we were talking about how it's about old men fucking, right? Like it's still, yeah, for sure. But we'd have to, that's like a thesis. That's kind of, that's more like the whole poem is about this. Do you see what I'm saying? So so why else? Like if we could be a little smaller about it, a little more specific. It's a certainty that the old men were going to get to this point. It's a certainty that everything in this game was going to hurt. What's not certain in this poem? What doesn't have to happen at all?
The game.
Yeah, Nobody's making them do this. Wouldn't that be wild? They get herded out like lions at a circus. Get out there! And it's, I fucking no. Go across it. Yeah, like it. They choose this. I think. Let's talk about that. All right. So to begin with, oh, because I didn't spell that. What's that? Okay. What do we do with the fact that they choose to do this? That it's not a certain. Do you buy that, first of all? I said it and nobody disagreed. You feel like they choose to play basketball?
Yeah.
Why?
Because they enjoy it. It makes them feel younger. Not as much.
Maybe. Okay, we got that for sure. And there's stuff in the poem too. I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit. A lot of the poem doesn't sound like they enjoy it though. Like, would this be fair to say? They enjoy the idea of playing basketball. I don't know how much they actually dig the act. Is that fair? Considering the description, right? That's kind of weird, right? That's a weird discrepancy. Might that matter? That they like the idea of playing the game. But the game itself, if you gave them the option, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them were like, nah, I'm good. Is that really them choosing to play? I'll say this. Why do they play? They do it to feel young. Any other reason, you think? And if not, and we'll push on that, what is it for these guys to feel young in this poem? What does that look like?
Reliving their like high school moments, you know, something like
Their
that.
glory days, right? Okay, let's do that. Now you're not gonna. Okay. I want to push on this though. I know your original answer, and I get it. Do they choose to do this?
They feel like they have to.
Why?
Because they're in denial about the relationship. Because it is unavoidable, they want to do everything they can to make it seem like it's not even a real thing.
Maybe.
Like some people, old people don't even want to use canes, even if they really need one.
I know, right? Or when like your 90-year-old grandfather is like, I'm gonna take out the trash. I'm like, sit the fuck down, like you'll break in half, right?
And then he's at the neighbor's house because he forgot where his trash can was.
Yeah. So it's, and again, all of that is understandable. Anybody would do it, right? I think if faced with, all that, like. But if we're gonna say it's so understandable that anybody would do it, again, I'm wondering, well, how much of it is really a choice? Like now we're getting into questions of free will, okay? We talked about this with Little Boy, and we're not, don't bring up multiple poems, please, in a paper. But for example's sake, if you remember in that poem, day to day, you do things, and you tell yourself, you choose these things. I don't know how true that is a lot of the time. Like you chose to come to this class, and it's like, you got a lot of shit telling you got to come to this class. You don't choose to every time. I'm not saying that. But you got a lot of things telling you got to come to this class. You got to write this paper pretty soon, right? You could choose to not. You could not, right? You could not write the paper. Good luck with that, right? Like it's. So there's all kinds of things that I think we assume on their face are decisions we make, and then I kind of wonder if something else is in play, right? There are forces that move you around that tell you to do things often. What I'm curious about, if we think about this, is there anything that might be kind of making this decision for these guys to want to relive those glory days of their youth when they were more physically capable and all that stuff? Might there be anything like that? Other than just, and this is on the table, getting old sucks. Like, I understand, but like, is there anything more specific than that in the poem? And if you can't remember, you can go look it up, but yes ma'am.
Just masculinity. Like, they don't want, just the society pushing, I'm assuming, like, what a man is, and they feel like they have to show their physical capabilities of playing basketball, and that, like, equates to, I'm still a man, I can still do things, I can still, like, bounce the ball.
For sure. Not least of which because that's the focus of this class, right? But think about the rest of the poem. And again, we only get it from the speaker. We don't actually get it from these guys. But think about the few details we get about these old men. What else do we know about them? It's a very small list. He assumes, right? And probably rightfully so. I mean, Yeah, what else?
They're veterans.
They're veterans of World War II, specifically. That's kind of it. That's it. That's a really telling list of what the concerns are in the poem. It's about physical ability, it's about sexual ability, and it's about man stuff, like war and basketball. That's kind of it. That's kind of it in the poem. And if that's our menu, and we're wondering, well, do they choose this or not? And I think you could very well make the case that they're doing this so they feel like men, like young men, right? We're basically, for a second time, we're basically connecting physical exertion, physical ability with that stereotypical list of what it is that makes a person masculine, right? And if they've fallen off, which they absolutely have, the first half of the poem is all about how they can't do anything physical. They know that too. That wouldn't be news to them, right? You can for sure make that case. All right, I want to, because we're going to run out of time, I want to talk to you about introductions real quick. And again, I don't want anybody at home to miss the shows. All right, lights are coming on. It's going to be bright. All right, let's do this real quick. If it's not. All right. So up to this point, we've talked about body paragraphs. I want to briefly talk to you about introductions because they're super different in terms of structure. There are 3 parts to a body paragraph, the way I talked about it. There are 4 to an introduction, okay? You guys know some of these. You know most of them, actually, in my experience. What are some of the parts of an introduction? I know you know a few. Okay. Well, I heard 2. So I'll do the one that comes first. I'll do the one that comes first. You can start with a hook. I always put a question mark because that part is optional. You don't have to have it. You guys love it. What is a hook?
Gets the reader interested.
Yeah, you hook them in, As Dave Chappelle would say, gotcha, bitch. I don't know if you're familiar. That's when he impregnates Oprah anyway. Something interesting. Now, I want to say here, you guys have a pretty funny bar with interesting. We mean interesting like interesting in a paper. We don't mean interesting like, I don't know, Avengers Endgame or something, right? You don't have to do that at the top of your paper. That would be pretty wild. So like interesting, what? Like a fact or an anecdote or a rhetorical question.
Can you start a paper with a quote? Like not from the text?
You can do a quotation. That's harder to do, especially on a shorter paper. 3 pages, I would advise against it because you got to set it up, and then the hard part really is you have to transition from that, especially if it's not from whatever text we're using, to the text we're using. I just don't think you'd have space. But you can do it. Usually you'll see it in papers that are like, I'd say at least 7, 8, 9 pages, 10 pages, something like that. So, but you can. Oh, I want to ask, do you guys know what a rhetorical question is? What is it?
Question you already know the answer to.
Good. The example I always give, if your mother says, did I ask for your opinion? What are you supposed to say?
Yes.
Nothing. But she just said, no. She's communicating an idea to you without actually stating it. She's telling you to shut up. But she didn't say that, right? That's a rhetorical question. It communicates one thing while posing it as a differently phrased question. Good. Hook. A hook for this paper might be, I don't know. Are you worried you're going to get old and die one day? Like something. Because the obvious answer is yes, but that's not really what that question's doing. That question is having you think about aging and what comes with it, right? Anyway, that's a hook. It's optional. The other parts are not. We mentioned thesis, and I'll put that here at the bottom because, as you know, it comes at the bottom. What's a thesis do? You guys know this. It's in your heart. What's a thesis? Yep.
Sets up your paper.
It sets up your paper, much like a topic sentence sets up a body paragraph, right? If a topic sentence, and we didn't have time to address this one today, but it's supposed to be the focus of a paragraph, a thesis is supposed to be the focus of the entire paper. Whatever argument you're proving, I can't remember it now, but whatever you said about, oh, you said something, damn it. Do you remember that I said was like next level, was like thesis stuff? You were kind of shooting for the moon a little bit in a body paragraph, and I was like, that needs to be. Anyway, when we dig into details like we've done for several classes now, that's more local, that's more body paragraph. If you're going to talk about the entire poem, now we might be talking about sort of the pressures of masculinity that these guys feel, or how they're trying to live up to like all kinds of societal standards. You probably don't have room for that in one paragraph. That's like a thesis type of thing. Okay. The other two parts. Any ideas? I know. Okay, the first one. And you guys, you're pretty good about this, but sometimes you forget, so. You have to introduce the text. I'm promising you, every semester, I have at least 2 or 3 folks at some point, they don't introduce the text. Do you know what happens if you don't do that? Usually, it means you don't talk about it. And it's wild, because you'll still write me a paper. And it'll be about ideas that are like, kind of connected to whatever poem you read, but they're not about the poem. It's bananas. How do you introduce, like if you're going to write about Oldman playing basketball, how do you think you do that? What's some information you got to make sure I have as a reader?
These guys.
You need the author and the title. In B.H. Fairchild's Oldman playing basketball, that's in quotation marks. What else? One more thing. Good. A brief summary. In B.H. Fairchild's Oldman playing basketball, what? How would you summarize this poem? The speaker, what?
It's watching Oldman playing
watches a group of old men struggle on the court, comma, what else happens? There's one other thing that's kind of important. He watches old men struggle on the court while, what else? Wondering to himself about all kinds of sex stuff involving old people. Yeah, you figure that how to phrase that. But that's the summary. That's the summary. That's how you introduce a text. Title, author, brief summary, like 1 to 2 sentences. Does not have to be long at all. Okay. There's all kinds of names for this part. I call it roadmap. And there's 2 reasons for this. By the way, you guys generally do a great job of these 2. And I mean, you at least give me this. We'll see how good it is. But you can give me a thesis. You could do that. Many of you will not give me this, and it bums me out. I'm gonna tell you why, but first I'm gonna tell you what it is. It does 2 things. Okay. Number 1, this is where you can give me some of the smaller ideas that are gonna build to your thesis. Okay. Think of it this way. If a thesis statement, it's a statement, so it can be more than a sentence, but this is also a shorter paper, so we're saying what? Max 2 or 3 sentences, right? Any more than that, that's way too big for this kind of paper, right? But you're gonna sum up 3 pages in 1 to 3 sentences. Do you know how broad that's gonna be? Like just how nearly vague that's gonna have to be? Do you know what I'm saying? To sum up that much information. The roadmap is where you can take smaller ideas that make up that thesis, and you give them to me before I get to the thesis. So if we're going to end up talking about the pressures of masculinity, societal standards, big shit, okay? I need something to prepare me for that. Something. So maybe I get a sentence or 2, if this isn't our paper, about the certainty of aging and how else we might apply that idea of certainty, that idea that certain things are unavoidable. Aging we get, but in this poem there's things that maybe we don't always consider unavoidable that are worth our time, right? That takes at least 2 sentences. And whatever your other paragraphs are doing, give me those ideas too. So when I get to the thesis, I'm prepared for you to convince me, is how I would put it, okay? The other reason I call it a roadmap, you see me kind of Vanna White gesturing to several paragraphs, to like the idea of several paragraphs. If your thesis does a pretty good job of summing up your paper, okay? And if your roadmap, by using your paragraphs, does a pretty good job of setting up that thesis, well then also your roadmap should do a pretty good job of letting me know what I'm going to see in your paper. Do you follow me? So the other way I would describe this, there should not be any surprises in your paper. Some of you are under this misconception, okay? You'll say things to me like, well, I didn't want to give it away. I was like, what? Some of you say these things. It's not a magic show, okay? The best way, because you're trying to convince me, whatever it is, you want to sell me. I know it's freaking me out too. You want to sell me on some kind of an idea. It's just people existing, but it shouldn't be. You want to sell me on whatever your ideas are. The best way to do that in a paper, no grand reveals, nothing like that. Give me your ideas, walk me through them so I can understand them, right? When I get to that thesis, I'm like, oh yeah, because they gave me all the information, all the context, I need to understand whatever they're arguing. I'm fully on board, and then when we get to those paragraphs, I'm prepared for the information I'm going to receive because you've brought it up, you've introduced it already. Okay, that's how this is meant to work. Questions about any of that? I know. What time is it?
So it says.
I wanted to kind of hammer out a really ugly thesis right now, but we're not going to do that. All right, homework. 2 things. Number 1, and I know that I'm too honest with you guys sometimes, and I'm about to do that. You got to read a poem called Beauty, okay? It is, in honestly everybody's opinion, the best poem in the book. I know I didn't make you buy the book, but they're all from the same book. It's the best poem in there. It's also the longest one. And I'm sure I don't need to remind anyone about how our last class went with 4 pages. I think this one's like 7. I know. But I'll tell you this. Even if you don't write about beauty, which is fine, write about whatever poem you want to write about. It does such a good job of setting up, because it's also the first poem in the book, it does such a good job of kind of like putting you in the world that these poems occur in, okay? Because I know we've talked about 3 of them up to now, but like you get the impression that all of these people are kind of from generally the same place, same time. They're all blue collar, they all have shit home lives, right? Like all these things we've been talking about. Beauty is a much longer illustration of that world. So if at any point, perhaps, you're writing about one of these poems and you're kind of at a loss or you're having trouble envisioning certain elements, Beauty can help with that, even if you don't write about it. Plus, I happen to think it's excellent. Here's the part where I'm too honest with you. Given our schedule, we will not talk about it in class. And I know what that means. I already know what that means. Okay? I'm going to post a video. In the off chance any of you want to write about beauty or have questions about it or whatever, I'm going to post a pretty in-depth video, like 20-ish minutes, where I just talk to the camera about it to you, to help you. You don't have to watch that either. I know what that means too. Okay? But all that stuff will be there for you. I want you to know what we're actually going to do. For next time, homework, you're supposed to read Beauty, honor system on that one, and also an intro paragraph to the best of your ability, and a new body paragraph, a new one. So even if you were lights out on this one, which is not likely given where we are in the process, okay? Or even if it was shit, write me a different one. Can be the same poem, can be a different poem. Sometimes you guys change your mind, whatever you want. But write me a different one. At this point, we're trying to actually start building your papers. So I just want you to generate material. Okay? Any questions before I let you go? I know. All right. I'll see you next week. Thank you.